This means that instead of giving food directly like corn or rice, we enable the people we serve to purchase food. And this can come in many forms. It can be prepaid bank cards, it can be mobile money, e-vouchers, or sometimes even cash. And the concept is that cash-based transfers can have certain advantages in the right situation. And among these, it improves dignity. So instead of us telling people what they should eat, they can choose their own food. It can be more cost effective, so in the situation where the local markets are strong, instead of us bringing food from another side of the world and distributing it, we can propose to the local economy, it stimulates the local economy. So it has certain benefits. For WFP, at least, the cash transfer is going well. In 2009, we did about $10 million of transfers globally. In 2018, we did $1.7 billion. So it's growing at a rate of 78% annually for us. And we're one of many humanitarian organizations and agencies, UN agencies. And these other organizations are also seeing similar trends in cash-based transfers. Before cash-based transfers, which each one of us UN agencies or humanitarian organizations provided our assistance in kind, so we gave food, the mandates were quite clear. It was clear what each organization is doing. As we're moving more towards cash transfers, our assistance is becoming very similar. We're providing similar kind of assistance to the same kind of people, essentially. So, let's say the mandate lines are becoming a bit more blurry. In order to provide cash transfers, usually in this financial service providers to many companies. However, what ends up happening is that the systems are quite fragmented. So WFP will have its own system for beneficiary management, they will be distributing cash, and they will contract one bank to provide this cash to the people we serve. The next agency will do the same with a different bank, and so on and so forth. So in Jordan, one of the places that we operate for the Syrian refugees, and where I have also worked for a bit, there is 45 organizations assisting the same people in the refugee camps. However, the assistance is not well coordinated, especially in the area of cash, so it ends up being quite siloed. If we are assisting the same way to the same people, the need for coordination is heightened, but there is no really good models on how to do this until now. One of the issues is technical. If everyone uses the same system, it's easy to have transparency and visibility and interoperability, but it's difficult to have one system that meets every purpose. If you want to connect the multiple systems together one-to-one, it becomes a different challenge, because to connect 4 systems, you need 6 connections. If to connect 10 systems, you need 45 connections. And it grows exponentially. And each one of these are custom connections with their own standards, and it just becomes difficult. What can help this is that if every person served had an identity, they had an address on the blockchain, email address, everyone can send you an email, but only you can send emails from your email address. So the different organizations each have their own address, and they can channel their entitlements towards the identity of the person we're serving on the blockchain. So just in a rough way, it could kind of almost look like this if you think about the inbox. You could see that WFP for food is providing $50 worth of food to this person. UNHCR in charge of refugees cash, WHO in charge of health, vaccination, UNICEF in charge of children education. So, excuse me, for the first time you create this visibility of who's providing assistance to whom. And this can be very useful because with this, imagine you're in and you want to help people. And this way you can look at the blockchain and you can see, okay, these people are already being assisted in this way, and if I have some money, maybe I target it in other areas, maybe sanitation that nobody else is doing. Also, some people might be more capable of enrolling themselves in more programs, and some of the most vulnerable people, maybe the less educated, the elderly, might not even know different programs exist. So some people will enroll themselves and start receiving assistance from many organizations, and some who might even need it more but don't know about it don't. So again, by creating this visibility, you can get a sort of optimization and harmonization, so we can stretch the limited resources to go even further. By doing that, we can also combine combine our WHO. So we put the beneficiary at the center of everything that we do. We channel our entitlements there, we get visibility, and from that location on the blockchain, we can create linkages to multiple outlets. So in this way, the convenience and choice available to the people we serve is increased. In Jordan, currently, sometimes beneficiaries are working around with 4 or 5 bank cards. $10 in this one, $5 in this one, and this ATM here and that ATM there. Here you could combine it, and also by connecting once to the blockchain, each organization can be connected to each other. So it solves that technical challenge of creating multiple different connections across different organizations. Another way we can use blockchain, so far we kind of talked about the assistance delivery and coordination of that, but another big challenge is the ID challenge. More than 1 billion people around the globe lack any form of formal identity, and without it, they can't participate really in society. They can't vote, they can't maybe open a bank account, they can't get a loan, they might not be able to get education. And also they're more vulnerable to, for example, trafficking. And the pieces of information that we do hold, especially in a humanitarian context, is also often very fragmented. So again, as the World Food Program, we might have a nutritional profile, WHO might have a health profile, UNICEF might have some documentation, but each one of us hold a different piece of the puzzle. And especially in refugee crisis, this is very difficult because refugees often arrive in a new country with any formal documentation. They spend a lot of time and effort re-establishing themselves, proving who they are, accumulating these credentials. In Jordan, I think about 60% of the population is under 18 in the refugee camps. 20% have been born in the camp. So people establish lives. The average refugee spends 15 years being a refugee. And all of, you have a life, you get married, you have work, and then if you go to a third country, so let's say if the Syrian refugee goes to Germany or if they go back to Syria, often this information stays behind in fragmented format across the different organizations that hold the information, and they have to kind of restart from scratch when they're back home or in the third country. And I just want to clarify here that when we talk about ID, people often think about identification, like a passport or maybe a driver's license. But identity is a very big concept. It's evolving, it's not fixed. You have a financial history, is your financial identity, your education history, your health history, your work history. All of these are different facets of your identity. And in fact, in our kind of work, we don't often need the foundational identity information. We don't necessarily need to know the first name or the last name of the person we're serving. But we do need to know what their needs are so we can serve them better. So one way is that the same general concept where we're talking about coordination of assistance is to try to coordinate identity information. So take it from the various organizations that each hold a piece and channel all of that also to this identifier on the blockchain. So that we can certify this person has attended the course and they're nutritionally aware. UNHCR can say they're a registered refugee. WHO can say they've been vaccinated. And all of these slowly accumulate to something useful to the refugee because they often need to prove this on a daily basis to get the assistance they need or to access the services that they need. And we could simplify quite a bit for them how this information can be gathered. And also this information can then follow them along in the places that they go. So if they go back to Syria or if they go to Germany, this history is not lost. They can take it with them. So that could be another very interesting use case for identity. Of course, it's worth mentioning that data protection privacy is quite important. Our colleague from Daimler in his presentation before just mentioned how the way it should be designed is that all of your information is on your phone. So you don't store it anywhere on the blockchain, especially not the sensitive information, but you give access to it. That works well in the first world or the developed world where people have phones and connectivity, but that's not always the case for us, so we need to take extra steps to be careful. So for the moment, I think a permissioned blockchain network, a private one, could perhaps be better so it's not open to the public so everyone can see everything. Of course, there's a lot of discussion about the benefits of public versus private chains, and that discussion can go on for a time. But for the moment, I think, for example, a permission network might be more suitable to our humanitarian use case. The other thing is, as a principle, public or private, humanitarian or not, I think at no point any sensitive personal information should go on the blockchain, like first name, last name, date of birth. Because again, in many cases, especially refugee scenarios, that information could create trouble for the person. So if a certain malicious actor finds out that this person is now a registered refugee in this place, that could then lead to trouble for them down the line. However, we can put some functional data. So for example, as the World Food Program, it will be very useful if we know, are we dealing with an infant here? Is it a female between the age of 20-30 who's the mother of a young baby? Is it an elderly citizen? Each one of these categories has a very different nutritional profile. But sometimes because of the data privacy and protection concerns, we even as WFP don't get that information. We just say, provide food for 5 people. We have no idea anything about these 5 people. So by putting some sort of functional information, again, so a female between 20-30 nursing mother, this could be very useful to target our operations and help others also target their operations. And the other thing is that even though we don't put any information, we do need to have a common identifier. So if we're going to coordinate, we need to somehow know we're talking about the same person. So for example, the way that works in Jordan is that UNHCR, which is the UN agency in charge of the assisting refugees, assigns random identifiers to the persons that we all serve, meaning that it's a code, it's a number, you can't really make what's behind it. So this would be a good way to sort of coordinate assistance, but I think even better is that instead of storing that number in plain text, it's better to hash it and put it on the blockchain. So people who already have the identity can calculate the hash and then see if this person is then find their account on the blockchain. But just by looking at the blockchain, you cannot even receive this random identifier as an extra level of privacy and security. So that's essentially on the ID data protection. Another point I think is relevant, we're all familiar with cryptocurrencies. Blockchain was born with cryptocurrencies, and they have some theoretical benefits. So currently, the way we're using blockchain, and I'll explain that in a moment, we're using it mainly for accounting purposes. So we create blockchain accounts for our refugees, we transfer entitlements to them, they conduct transactions, we authorize transactions. Based on the blockchain records, then we pay the shops where they conducted their purchases. If we could use a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, so we would just then transfer the Bitcoin to their account, they would spend it, and that would be the end of it. The transaction would also be the settlement, so we wouldn't have to do this extra. Financial inclusion is a really important part. Many of the people that we serve are unbankable in the sense that they're vulnerable and they're not profitable for the private sector to target them. So this way the blockchain account would also become the bank account, and that would be a massive step towards financial inclusion. And also in terms of donations and everything else, there will be full visibility of where the money came from, where it went, and it was accounted for properly. The current issues, real issues with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin in our context, one is the volatility. If we give someone, a refugee, $5 worth of something today, it should be more or less worth 5 tomorrow. With crypto, it could be worth 10, which is great, but it could also be worth 2, which is not acceptable. So that's one problem. Legality is another problem that, cryptocurrencies are not always, they're also rarely explicitly illegal, but they often fall in this gray area, which in our world doesn't work really well. But most important of all, they're not widely accepted. If we give a Syrian refugee a Bitcoin in the middle of the desert in Jordan and he or she can spend it, there's not a whole lot of point to that, right? But I do think there's a lot of hope for this to change. We've heard of stable coins where solve the volatility problem, and in some jurisdictions solve the legality problem. They might one day also solve the acceptability problem. There's also talk about governments putting their own currency on the blockchain, like the Korean won or the Jordanian dinar or the euro or the dollar. And if that happens, then you solve all 3 problems. It will not be volatile locally, it will be legal, and it will be widely accepted as well. And that's a future that I think could be really important in our work and also for financial inclusion. Because that same blockchain account now can hold also the money that has identity information that's being used for coordination of humanitarian aid. And a lot of services can be microloans. And having solved the identity problem, hopefully a bit earlier, also know your client information can be used through the blockchain, because that's one of the main impediments sometimes for people to access official financial services, because they can't prove who they are or they don't have requisite documentation. So blockchain can really solve a lot of these problems that surrounds the humanitarian work that we do. This has been all in the context of blockchain in general. Now I'd like to speak a bit more about our specific implementation called Building Blocks and how we hope to bring about all of these things that I spoke about. So our project has been operational since 2017 and is currently assisting 106,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan, making it the largest implementation of blockchain technology for humanitarian aid in the world. To date, we've transferred $63 million to refugees and through more than 3 million transfers. Internally, we've experienced certain efficiencies, including having more control. So for example, previously when we had to do things through the bank, it would take about 3 weeks to open a bank account, issue a card for a beneficiary and all of that. And now we can do it in a matter of a minute or two. So if we get a call in the middle of night that 15,000 refugees are coming across the border, by the morning they can be jogging, for example. And because we're now performing certain things ourselves on the blockchain that previously were performed by the bank, we're saving some money. So far, we've saved $1 million just by doing what we do. So in that sense, all the investment we put in the development has already come back. But for these, they take advantage of certain features of blockchain. But I think to me, one of the most important one is when you cross organizational boundaries. So when you do go into that multi-agency scenario, what I was speaking about before, and that's where I think the neutrality of blockchain comes into play, because you don't force someone to use someone else's system or different standards. There is a neutral space. You can design a blockchain so everyone is completely equal on it. Everyone operates a node, everyone owns it, everyone operates it equally. And I think that neutral space can be a key to solving some of the challenges in achieving broader collaboration. And through that, of course, by amalgamating all the information, then you can certainly impact. Having had success in Jordan, we're now looking to expand the project to Bangladesh for the Rohingya refugees and also into Palestine. And we are also cautiously looking at applications of identity. For me, identity, more than anything else, requires collaboration across various actors to work, again, because we all hold a fragment of the information. But because the technology is new and the people read all sorts of things on the internet, I think it's important to approach it a bit more slowly. So to start with something less sensitive, such as financial transfers. And once everyone, especially in the humanitarian community, which is not always at the forefront of technology, to demonstrate how this works and how data protection privacy works, how security works, and then explain that using the same exact option. And that's also a hope that we hold strongly. So some of the challenges we face, at least in our world, one is misperceptions about blockchain. So you talk about blockchain, people look up online blockchain, they read about Bitcoin, they read about the darknet, and they say, why do we have to use this in the humanitarian context? So one of our challenges was that, and in fact the very first thing we did, a proof of concept, I'll show a photo of it later, was to demonstrate the difference between cryptocurrency and blockchain as a technology layer. The other one I think is applicable everywhere is this resistance to change. There is a bit of legacy thinking. There's been a lot of investments in traditional systems, and so if you can show, or if you do show something new works better, faster, and it's cheaper because most of it is open source, people think about, okay, but we've invested already so much in this, we shouldn't adapt that. Whereas really, that's in finance, we call that throwing good money after bad money. If it makes sense, you just do it. In that sense of the story. And this is one of the points I alluded to earlier, is that the technology has been so far developed, presumably in the first world, and used mainly in the first world, where we take certain things for granted, that everyone has a smartphone and connectivity. In our world, neither of that is true. We take it for granted that everyone can, I don't know, log into an email account or you can use an application on the phone. In our world, again, that's not true. So these are some of the things we grapple with a little bit on a daily basis, but we are working to the best that we can to address them, and I think that most of them are time-limited problem. Connectivity is improving across the globe. Smartphone prices are reducing, so I think we're doing what we can with what's available currently, and as more things come up, we hope to further empower the people we serve. Because, again, as our colleague alluded, with blockchain, you can have assurance that you own and control your own data. Your data is with you, and you authorize every single access and usage to that data. A reality we cannot yet do because the people we serve don't have devices, but we're setting up the environment so when that becomes a reality, we're ready to support that as well. So I'd like to show you a video of the actual building blocks transactions in the actual refugee camps in Jordan. So what you see, the gentleman in the green is the refugee, the lady in the red is the cashier. On the right, you have a traditional supermarket cash register, let's say, where she's scanning the items. Once that's been done, the gentleman scans his eyes, and we do not hold the biometric data as WFP. We have no access to it. UNHCR, on the other hand, who is the refugee agency, does. So that by random code that we know the transaction amount, we know who's conducting it, and we then conduct the transaction on the blockchain. So may I ask you please to play the video? Is that, and I think this is probably like the highest tech supermarket in the world, and it's in the middle of the desert in a refugee camp in Jordan. So we're quite happy with the way that things are working there. I just wanted to also note that we're using private Ethereum implementation with proof of authority consensus every 2 seconds, so you can get finality in 2 seconds. So what you saw is the end-to-end transaction. With that, I'll end. This is a photo from the proof of concept I was talking about. This is January of 2017 in Pakistan on the border with India, a certain population that we also assist. And here that was the first thing we did, was to show that blockchain can be used different than cryptocurrency. It can be used for accounting, for cash, and for transfers. Thank you.